Picture this. It's freezing cold in Imperial Russia. The Romanov dynasty, literally the most powerful royal family on the entire planet, is secretly collapsing from the inside. Their young prince is dying. The best doctors can't help. The high priests can't help. Science, money, immense power, all of it has completely failed. And then, out of nowhere, a wandering mystic from Siberia walks into the Grand Palace. We're talking a guy with a long, unkempt beard, unwashed clothes, and these incredibly piercing, unsettling eyes. He has absolutely zero royal education, no status whatsoever. And yet, within months, he becomes the single most influential man in all of Russia. So, we really have to ask, was he a saint, a fraud, or a genius? How did Grigory Rasputin actually pull this off? Was he genuinely endowed with miraculous healing abilities? Was he just an incredibly brilliant fraud? Or was he actually a genius psychologist operating way ahead of his time? Well, as we'll see in this explainer, the true answer is actually far more disturbing, because Rasputin wasn't just controlling an empire, he was actively exploiting the deepest blueprints of human psychology. And this brilliantly illustrates just how absolutely absurd this historical situation was. Think about it. On one side, you have the Romanovs, unimaginably wealthy, politically omnipotent, yet totally emotionally shattered and desperate. On the other side, you have Rasputin, uneducated, desperately poor, but armed with this terrifying, unshakable confidence. The guy had zero worldly status, right? Yet he gained absolute total power over a dying empire. It completely defies logic. But as we're about to discover, logic had absolutely nothing to do with it. Because here is the kind of terrifying part. This story, it isn't really about some dusty historical figure in a Russian winter. It's actually about us. It's a mirror. It shows us just how incredibly vulnerable human beings become when we are afraid, emotionally desperate, lonely, or spiritually empty. The psychological traps that the most powerful family on Earth fell into back in 1916, they are the exact same traps we fall into today.
To really get why this happens, we need to look at modern neuroscience, which, by the way, completely validates Rasputin's methods. We all love to think of ourselves as these highly logical creatures, right? But in reality, our brains have two totally distinct operating systems. You have the rational brain, which is slower and processes facts, and then you have the emotional brain, which reacts instantly and ultimately drives our decisions. Rasputin possessed this rare, frankly dangerous ability. He knew how to make people genuinely feel seen. And when someone makes you feel intensely understood, your emotional brain completely overrides your rational brain. You might think you're making logical choices, but you're actually just chasing a feeling.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the exact mechanism Rasputin used is called psychological projection. When human beings don't understand something, and especially when they are operating out of pure fear, we have this massive tendency to project magical qualities onto it. Rasputin would just stare deeply into people's eyes. He would speak really slowly, listen intensely, and use this heavy spiritual silence. He didn't even have to claim he was a god. By simply being confident and mysterious right in front of desperate people, they projected immense magical power onto him all by themselves. Honestly, think about it. If Rasputin were around today, he absolutely wouldn't be wandering the Siberian wilderness. He was essentially the original spiritual influencer. Today, he'd probably have, 40 million followers on social media, a highly profitable crystal-selling website, a massive channel called something like Awaken Your Divine Masculine Energy, and there would definitely be about 3 expose documentaries made about him every single month. Human psychology really hasn't changed a bit since 1916. Only our internet speed has. But we really have to understand the specific environment that allowed this to happen in the first place. Rasputin didn't rise simply because he was charismatic. He rose because his targets were emotionally shattered. The Romanov prince suffered from hemophilia, a deadly condition where his blood just wouldn't clot. Every tiny bump or bruise could literally kill him. The empress lived in constant waking terror, and extreme fear destroys rational thinking. When people are in unbearable pain, they don't search for the truth. They search for emotional relief. That level of desperation makes humans incredibly vulnerable to cults, fake gurus, and toxic relationships. We can actually demystify Rasputin's quote-unquote magic by looking at the hard science of charisma. Because charisma isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's built on very specific traits: absolute certainty, intense eye contact, emotional intensity, and a healthy degree of unpredictability. And what does this actually do? Well, it makes people feel something profound, it completely bypasses factual analysis, and it commands absolute attention. Rasputin was a natural master of these data points. He prioritized intense feelings over facts because he inherently knew that humans will always remember how you made them feel long after they completely forget what you actually said.
Now, you might be sitting there watching this and thinking, well, come on, I'm way too smart to ever fall for a Rasputin. But that brings us to the myth of intelligence. We always assume manipulation only works on the weak-minded. But here's the thing. Intelligence does not automatically heal emotional wounds. A lonely genius can absolutely still join a cult. A highly successful CEO can still fall into a deeply toxic relationship. This actually echoes ancient wisdom from Buddhism to Stoicism. Unresolved trauma completely bypasses your IQ. If you have unhealed pain, your brilliant, highly logical mind will actually work against you by rationalizing the manipulation. Which brings us directly to today. We need to make a hard pivot to the modern digital age right here. Because Rasputin didn't disappear, he just evolved. Back in 1916, manipulation meant one man giving emotional relief to terrified royals. Today, modern manipulation is an algorithm serving highly targeted dopamine hits to anxious scrollers. The entire attention economy operates exactly like Rasputin did. It tracks your fears, it tracks your insecurities, your desires, and it profits heavily off your dysregulated mind.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how subtle these modern Rasputins actually are. They don't look like dirty mystics anymore. They wear luxury brands, or they hide behind these warm, totally relatable social media smiles. But make no mistake, their tactics are exactly the same. They use outrage and fear to completely bypass your logic. They create emotional addiction and endless validation loops. They use algorithmic psychology to keep your nervous system in a constant state of hyperstimulation. Because at the end of the day, an anxious, lonely, and divided mind is incredibly easy to influence and control. So how do we actually defend ourselves against this? How do we stop being so emotionally programmable? Well, we need a highly actionable system. Here is the 7-layer anti-manipulation framework. Step 1 is emotional awareness. Simply ask yourself, are you acting out of fear or maybe loneliness right now? Step 2, slow down decisions. Remember, manipulators always demand urgency. True wisdom demands a pause. Step 3, build internal validation so you aren't desperately seeking it from the outside. Step 4, learn critical thinking to actively question the narratives you're fed. Step 5 is to heal emotional wounds. Honestly, this is your ultimate armor. Step 6, limit dopamine overload to protect your focus. And finally, step 7, develop spiritual intelligence, which is really just the ability to observe your thoughts without being completely trapped by them. Healing your nervous system and slowing down is absolutely the ultimate psychological self-defense. Imagine your mind as a kingdom. If the king is asleep, anyone can enter the castle. But awareness is the awakened king. I mean, that is just a profoundly powerful way to look at it. If you aren't paying attention, fear enters, addiction enters, manipulators enter. True maturity only really begins when we stop desperately seeking external saviors to rescue us, wake up our internal king, and start truly understanding ourselves. Because if you don't actively protect that kingdom, the invader becomes incredibly difficult to remove. Just look at the legendary stories of Rasputin's end. The Russian elites finally decided he was way too dangerous and conspired to assassinate him. As the stories go, he was poisoned, shot multiple times, beaten, and finally thrown into a freezing river. And yet, he still refused to die easily. Now, whether that is perfectly historically accurate or, slightly exaggerated for dramatic effect, the symbolism is deeply profound. Emotional manipulation is equally hard to kill because our own underlying human weaknesses just keep resurrecting it. So, the crucial point is this. Rasputin wasn't powerful because he was literally magical. He was powerful because humans desperately wanted certainty in a terrifying world. The ultimate protection against control is not paranoia, it is deep,
unflinching self-awareness. Because the most dangerous manipulators in history and the ones operating on your screens right now today, they rarely control people by force. They control pain. If you actually understand your own pain, absolutely no one else can ever use it against you.
I want to leave you with this really provocative question. The next time someone promises you guaranteed certainty, instant enlightenment, or total emotional salvation, will your inner king be awake? Will you pause, take a step back, and actually observe your own emotional state before just handing over your power? Protecting your focus and your emotional baseline is literally the most important work you can do. If this explainer helped you understand the deeper psychological lessons hidden inside our history, make sure to protect your focus, dive deeper into your own self-awareness, and join us again as we continue to break down the complex forces shaping our world. See you next time.